Welcome to the Parent Advocate Podcast, a show where we celebrate, defend, support, and uplift the voices of the LGBTQIA community. I'm your host, Steven Chikumba. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Lisette Trujillo.
Hi everyone, Lisette here, she, her, aya. The mission of the Parent Advocate Podcast is to elevate conversations and reframe narratives around trans and non-binary youth to help change hearts and minds. Each week we bring you our take on all things happening from the perspective of two BIPOC parents of transgender kids.
Lisette, it's been a minute, but we've got to talk about SCOTUS and the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, the tragic murder of Juniper Blessing, and the horrific responses online to her death, and the criminal subpoena out of Texas for NYU Langone's transgender patients.
That's right, Stephen. So much has happened since we last spoke. We've got a lot to catch up on.
So what are we waiting for? Welcome everyone once again to the Parent Advocate Podcast. Let's get started. Lisette, can you believe it's been a month? Literally, it's been a whole month since the last time we recorded a podcast.
Well, you've been on a press tour. You've been out there promoting the dads. I've missed you, but loved watching all the photos.
Listen, I have missed you all so much. First and foremost, we've got to do the life catch up before we talk about the other things. I'm going to start because you're always like, you're the one who's doing all the press things, so you talk about your life. So I'm going to talk about my life because there has been quite the movie being made in the background and in real life. First things first, I just got back from the PTEC convening. Parents for Transgender Equality had their, I don't even know what number convening it is, but we just met in DC and we've got a whole bunch of new parents, another set of parents from New Jersey, Vidi and Onkar, a family from Arizona that I actually sent you their pictures while I was there, Chris and Julio.
We've known them for a long time.
Okay, well, they definitely were repping AZ hard. Jenna, her name is Jenna, but I think it's actually Jennifer, but she goes by Jenna. And so now there's Jenna and Jennifer and Jen Slipikoff, and there's just too many Jens, all right? Just too damn many Jens up in the cut. And there's more whose names escape me right now, but it's really nice to have this new crop of parents. And Lisette, we've tipped the scale. It is a majority minority organization and not the other way around. So the people of color outnumber the white people on the council. And I think that is progress.
It is progress. I'm really happy to hear it.
Okay, so beyond PTEC, what else happened? Obviously, I was at the Ali Forney Center Gala, which was amazing. Lisette, they raised $3 million that night to support LGBTQ plus care and housing. And it was amazing. It was amazing. And not for nothing, I also met Liev Schreiber, who is pretty cool. Very low key dude, like not a lot of rah-rah, very humble, very unassuming. My height, love a tall dude. He was like, I want to go to the retreat. I was like, it's coming up May. And he's like, I can't do May. How about next year? And I was just like, say less. Say less. Listen, I don't know if he was just talking, because that's what people do sometimes.
Did you exchange info?
I met him through Alex Roque, who was the president and executive director of the Ali Forney Center. So he said he was going to put us in contact. I'm not going to press him for Liev Schreiber's information, although I think I'm going to see him in 2 weeks at the New Fest screening of The Dads. So we're just going to be hanging out, you know what I'm saying? New besties, D Wade, Liev Schreiber, it's just, I just roll in those kind of circles. You understand what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying, right?
Yeah. For sure. Was his daughter there?
She was not. His wife was there, and they were honorees. They received an award for their advocacy, and they were talking about the support of his daughter. So it was really nice, but I don't think she was actually in the room. And if she was in the room, I didn't meet her. But there's always tomorrow.
It's been beautiful to see him and Naomi Watts kind of step into this moment when there are so many celebrity parents who support trans youth, and we don't really hear a lot from them. So it's been great.
It's interesting because they're co-parenting now because his new wife, his second wife, Taylor, is obviously also very supportive of Liev and Naomi's daughter. And it was just an interesting thing to see he and Taylor being acknowledged for the relationship that they've built and the relationship they built as advocates with a trans daughter and a stepdaughter. So it was just interesting. I was also looking for Naomi and I was like, oh, he's remarried. And we're not talking about Naomi, but the fact that they're still publicly supporting their daughter is amazing. Honestly, beyond the PTEC convening and the gala, all the screenings and the film festival. So
I'm waiting for testifying.
Child, oh my God. Like, do you see what I'm saying? There's so many things. Okay, so
I'm
right.
living
So
vicariously through you.
testifying actually was the most recent thing that I did. It wasn't even P-TECH. It wasn't even the gala. It was I testified on behalf of A 2218, which is an assembly bill that would enshrine a former executive order into law. And so there was on Monday, preceding Monday, there was a hearing in the Senate for Senate Bill 2260, which was the companion to A 2218. And essentially, I was one of just a gang of people who came to testify, mostly in support of, a couple in opposition to. And I wrote about this in my Substack about this exchange I had with this guy. The assembly hearing room was full, like standing room only, such that you couldn't even walk in the door without running into bodies. And so as a result, they opened up overflow rooms where you could listen to the testimony. And if you were actually going to be providing a statement or providing testimony, you would be called and they would wait for the people who were in the overflow rooms to come into the main room to provide their testimony. Some State House staffer came into the room, made the announcement that overflow rooms had been set up. And this white dude, when I tell you inches from her face, this dude is barking at this woman. I'm seeing this. They're about 3 feet from me, 2 feet from me. Like, I'm sitting on a bench. The door is right here to my right, and they're right in front of the door. So they're right in front of me. So I can see, I can hear, I'm seeing the body language, how aggressive he is. And she kind of was just like, sir, I'm just trying to tell people there's an overflow room. She walked out and I see she was shaking. So I'm like, okay, this dude is following her. I'm going to follow him because I'm not finna let some white dude just be all aggressive towards anybody, not in my presence. Like, I'm not one of those people who's going to see something and be like, oh, I didn't see anything. Absolutely not. That is why we are where we are, because too many people are just like, oh, it doesn't involve me, so I'm not going to get into it. I was going to get into it. So I got up, I went outside, dude is still in her face, telling her what he's not going to do, what she can't make him do, whatever. And so I'm thinking, okay, let me just put myself between their two bodies. I literally put my hands on his shoulders and was like, sir, let's just take this. He said, get your hands off me. Don't touch me. And I was like, you know what? He's right. I should not have touched him. I did not have his consent to touch him. And so I said, I apologize, but you should not be talking to this woman in this way. She's now, yeah, security, I need somebody up here. He's being really aggressive, whatever. But now he's barking on me. But once he hears security, he turns and hightails it towards one of the overflow rooms. And I stay there for a little bit just to make sure, like, old girl is cool. She's now got security. She's like recounting the incident. Nicole happened to walk up at that moment and she was like, you should never put your hands on anyone. I was like, I know, but I was trying to, like, dude was really aggressing on her. And, then I went back into the room, whatever. A little while later, who should come in opposition to the bill but old aggressive white dude, Mr. Barky, and starts off with, I'm a former homosexual. You could have seen everybody in the room throw their hands out like, oh, because of course, a former homosexual is going to be the one to oppose a bill that would strengthen New Jersey's SHIELD laws to protect medical healthcare practitioners in the state from overreach from other states. Mind you, did he talk about the SHIELD law itself? No, he talked about gender affirming healthcare. He talked about how people were being brainwashed and parents are giving into the medical industry, which is making millions of dollars. The medical industry is not being made rich off of trans people's healthcare. No. So we're clear. We are a infinitesimal minority in terms of the actual patients receiving that care. So if you're really trying to go after the medical industry, it's not because they're providing healthcare to trans patients. It's because they're providing that same healthcare to cisgender patients, and they have been for time immemorial. So get your facts straight. But that wasn't even the point. The point was that this dude was just going off with his right-wing talking points, as every person who got up in opposition to the bill actually did. None of them spoke to the actual bill. All of them spoke to gender affirming healthcare. All of them spoke to the harm to unborn babies. None of them cared about the actual people, the living people who have an opinion and a say about how these SHIELD laws would actually improve their quality of life, how it would protect practitioners to continue to provide the care to all patients in the state of New Jersey, cisgender and gender expansive alike. Oh my God, it just pissed me off.
Stephen, that was a lot. But I was really proud of you because I think that was your first time actually showing up to testify at your state capitol, which is a big deal. You've seen us all do it for years. And I was like, yay, I was really proud of you.
I was channeling my inner Lisette.
Yeah, but I'm sure you felt really proud. So what did it move through your committee hearing and now it's moving to the Senate?
So it's actually, it moved to the Senate first. So the Senate
Okay.
voted it out of committee. The Assembly voted it out of committee. And so now it can go to a full vote on the House floor or consideration on the House and Senate floors.
Yeah. So when do you find out?
It was voted out of Assembly the day that I testified. I suspect that it will be voted into law by the Senate and the Assembly and arrive on Governor Michael Sherrill's desk for her signature in short order.
Stephen, I'm so proud of you. Congratulations on all the things.
I thank you. I thank you. So enough with me. What's going on with you?
Nothing. I've been
What do you
quietly
mean?
watching everything you're doing. So when my mom came and visited, which was the last time we did a podcast, she had me on the go for like 3 weeks. And so she left, and I've spent the rest of this time being a little hermit, watching you do your thing, working, and like doing the things that I do over here. So nothing super exciting. We got
That's
Daniel.
not true. That's not true.
What do you mean? I've been quiet.
GLM.
Oh, that's right.
Like,
Wow.
I haven't been able to attend, but I have been seeing all of the work that's happening. You were just part of a research article that just came out. Stop playing with me, Lisette. I be peeping you just the same way you be peeping me. So give us a real update.
That's right. I forgot about that. So Closeted Media did a really good article on what's happening in the mental health care sphere of gender affirming care and the ways in which youth are losing access to their mental health care providers. I shared kind of that opposite of like, we always made sure Daniel had a full care team. We paid out of pocket. We were lucky to have funds to do that, and just how having a proper care team, having access to mental health care really had a positive impact on Daniel's well-being and growing up. So we did do that. GLM, we're working on a summer series, which I'm really excited about. And we'll share more information as that starts. But June, we'll have something available for people to participate in virtually. We got Daniel's senior portraits. It made me cry. I think it made Jose feel really good because when we first got here, Jose is like, we've taken everything away from Daniel. Like, he's not going to have these milestones. And Daniel has prom next week. He got his senior portraits. He's getting ready for, school in the fall. So it's like these really great milestones that are happening in his life. And I'm just writing on the Substack, as you know, and watching things happen and honestly feeling anxiety. Like when the SCOTUS ruling on voting rights, and I know we're going to get into that a little bit later, happened. I mean, I had a full moment, and I know a lot of people did. They had big feelings about it. It was International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia. And so we went to that protest this past weekend. When we first moved out here, we stumbled upon that protest. And so this time we got to be a part of it, which was kind of cool. And then there's new families moving out here that we've been just connecting with and talking to. But Stephen, you know me and like the parent sadness, it's all up in the WhatsApp thread for the families. And I'm just like, ugh. So I just keep throwing resources in. But I'm not going to run a support group out here because I'm done. I'm done with that piece of my helping families.
I get it. And I think that was an adequate update. And since you talked about one of our topics, how about we get into today's topics?
Let's do it.
Lisa, I'm sorry, but what the fuck is wrong with this fucking country? Like, seriously, SCOTUS decided that race can no longer be a consideration when identifying districts, and they gutted the last bastion of protection for people of color from the Voting Rights Act. Essentially, the day after, every southern state immediately moved to eliminate any majority black voting district in their state. And it's like one after the next has actively moved to eliminate them. Some have gone as far as removing Democratic, and when we say Democratic in this instance, we mean black representatives from their offices. It is abhorrent, and it's so frustrating because everybody knows this was the design. This was Robert's design from the beginning. He's never cared for the Voting Rights Act, and every opportunity he has had since then to gut it and eliminate its provisions, he's done. And so now we are 61 years after the Voting Rights Act, with less than 10% of elected officials across the United States being people of color. People of color, not even black people of color, Asian, Latino, black, East Asian, whatever other non-white denomination you want to consider in that 10%, we have a almost all white everything everywhere. And somehow people think that we don't need the Voting Rights Act anymore. It's really disgusting.
Stephen, we can use race for Kavanaugh stops, but we can't use race to protect voting rights. Like, make it make sense to me. It does make sense in that these people are hateful and wanted to undo democracy, and officially they've done this, right? And now people have to show up in numbers to vote come November to salvage whatever we can. Because let's face it, we're a democratic republic. We've never even truly gotten to be a full democracy. The experiment is like holding on by a thin thread, and people need to show up. And when I say people, if you've been a parent to a trans kid, a white parent, a Latinx parent like me, this should matter to you. This should matter to you because trans rights are deeply tied to Black rights in every single way. And so I've been not surprised, but still disappointed at the silence from so many white parent advocates who have not said much on this issue.
So I really do believe that people don't know what just happened. When I say they don't know what just happened, they've heard the headline that SCOTUS eliminated some of the protections from the Voting Rights Act. Okay, what does that actually mean? That means that the 18th Amendment, which gave Black people the right to vote in this country, didn't mean shit because Jim Crow essentially put all of these barriers in the way of Black people's ability to vote. Poll taxes, literary tests, all types of things were put in the way of Black people's ability to vote, including lynching, including intimidation at the polls. All of the provisions that came from the Voting Rights Act were specifically meant to address the rampant discrimination that took place when Black people tried to vote in the South across this country. And so the provisions of Section 2 made sure that anything that smelled like discrimination that prevented people from the ability to vote would be scrutinized heavily, and that they had to basically get permission to make changes to voting in the states. So you couldn't suddenly create a new identity law without that being cleared. You couldn't suddenly create a new literacy test without that being cleared. There were super hurdles that you had to go through in order to prevent Black people from being disenfranchised at the ballot box. And somehow people think that that's gone away. Like Texas just redistricted to eliminate any potential of Black representation in Texas, and multiple states followed suit. Louisiana specifically tried to draw a map that would have disenfranchised Black people. That's how this case got to the Supreme Court. And people were saying the Voting Rights Act explicitly prohibits this type of behavior. And SCOTUS says, no, we live in a colorblind society. We no longer need the protections that the 1965 Voting Rights Act was intended to address because we have Black representation. Look, we had a Black president. We have Black elected officials. And so everything is good.
You know, I know that you say people might not know, but I got a story time here. It was super close to the Biden-Trump election. I was facilitating the parent community in Tucson, and one of the families decided to organize like a beer meetup. You know, we were coming out of COVID. People could go outside and do like open air events, and there was like an outside bar. And I remember there was this one dad who saw himself as really progressive, like casually talking to another white family that you know, about how his friends who loved and supported his trans daughter told him, hey man, we're gonna still vote for Trump. And he was like, but you know, they really love my daughter. They're my best friends, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like catching this, right? And I'm like, oh, why did your friend say that? And then he casually told me, because they think that Black people will do to them what we have done to Black people. But they're good people and they love my daughter. And I said, well, that says more about your friend. That says more about your friends than it does about Black communities who have been holding up their end of democracy. And I went on a whole rant, which made him really angry. And then I experienced a microaggression out of it afterwards. But I know that we want to believe that people mean well. But when parents who are part of parent communities saying that they want to support their trans kids, that they're very progressive, still maintain relationships with people who will say some racist things like that, then you know that people know what they're voting for. And we need more allies to speak up and show up at this moment, and not just speak up and show up for their children, which rarely happens too.
Factuals, but I'm speaking about the lack of outrage in these spaces across the board. I'm not even talking about from white people. I'm not talking about from allies. I'm talking about from Black people. I'm talking about, I don't think the average person of color truly appreciates what's happening right now with the Voting Rights Act unless you are in a southern state. And if they do know what's happening, I have not seen a modicum of the outrage that I think should accompany what's just happened. People literally died for Black people to be able to vote. People were beaten, were hosed, had dogs sicked on them, were imprisoned in droves, had their homes burnt. Like, Black people truly, truly suffered for this right. And even today, we are experiencing a retrenchment to those days. Like, Jim Crow is very much alive in the South. People don't seem to understand it. Black people are still today being hung from trees today in 2026. Black children go missing at 8 to 10 times the rate white children go missing, and you never hear about it. This is a real crisis, and I don't think people appreciate it. I don't think people really understand what's happening.
Also, they found the body of a young Latina teenage male in Washington, D.C., outside of a police department. And the people that were showing up in protest to say, like, what happened to this man and why is there no media coverage were Black folks, Black community members that were like, look at what's this happens across the board to all of our communities, Black and brown communities. And to see like conservative Latinos not understand what our Black siblings have done to ensure that we have a right to democracy angers me. It angers me. I've had some deep anxiety watching the news. There has, watching lynchings continue to happen this past year. Another young man went missing and then they found him. The violence of our nation and how numb people are to it in this moment is hard to watch. It's hard to process. And I hope that we see more and more people speak up and speak out in this moment, because it matters more than anything.
Well, so let's talk about Juniper Blessing.
Yes.
We are at a point where the violence that is befalling our children is alarmingly high, and the response to that violence is disturbing, to say the least. Juniper Blessing is a 19-year-old. She was a 19-year-old transgender girl going to school in Seattle, Washington, who was violently murdered in an off-campus housing by somebody who thankfully was caught, but who stabbed her 40 times. And I can't imagine, as a parent of a college student, a trans college student right now, what that must have been like, experiencing that phone call, learning that your child, your 19-year-old daughter, had been murdered at school. Tragedy upon tragedy upon tragedy. And what is so disturbing about her death is the response from people online that I can only describe as grotesque. It was so disturbing. I made a video about how disturbed I was. I got a call from Ellen from HRC, and she was just like, have you heard about Juniper? And I was like, of course I've heard about it. But then she was like, have you seen the response online? Now, I don't do that. I don't look at comments, because people are really disgusting and hateful and cruel and inhumane. I couldn't have imagined that people would be responding the way they did about Juniper's death online with their full faces, with their whole names, with their full chest. And it was absolutely disgusting. Comment after comment after comment. I'm not going to repeat it, but it was horrible. And I am still reeling from the fact that people can be so cruel that even in death, what is for any family the most tragic experience, to lose their child, that people would take that moment to gleefully make fun of this child in her passing. I just can't.
It's really hard, and call me the pessimist today, but when you have the far right and religious communities telling their constituents that empathy is the gateway to the devil, that is why we are seeing these things online. It's cultural, right? Like, it's evil and cultural, and they're telling each other that empathy for anyone who's different than them is unwarranted and will lead them to sin. I mean, that is why we're seeing what we're seeing online, and it's heartbreaking. I don't have words for it anymore.
I need someone to help me make sense of it all. You've got these people who call themselves Christian, who believe in the example set by Jesus Christ. And the last time I checked, like, Jesus rocked with the lepers. Jesus consorted with prostitutes. He hung with the homeless. Like, he was with the downtrodden and the oppressed. He was the one who washed his apostles' feet. Like, this was the person who was of service to other people. I don't know how you take that person's example and then you are basically shitting on some person's dead child. You have to help me reconcile those two incongruous things, because that's all these Jesus freaks who are talking about we're gonna go to hell because of our abomination and all, like, this. That's you.
Yeah, I don't have any words for that, Stephen, other than they're not following Jesus's lead at all. I mean, he was a radical who was killed for being radical.
Really said. I just, like, if any one of these people's children died, would we be gleefully mocking their deaths?
Absolutely not. We would be talking about gun control. We were talking about the need to reduce violence online. Like, you know, but this is really interesting because Daniel, one time, this was a few years ago, but one of our friends, a parent of a trans kiddo, has a podcast and had interviewed someone who had talked about how Instagram had a 24-hour blip that they said was an accident, where boys who were on Instagram saw violence for 24 hours. Daniel told me he talked about it with his friends. Some people got pornography, other people got car crashes, other people got violent fights. And Daniel was like, it was the weirdest thing. For like 24 hours, my algorithm was like really violent. And so were my friends. And we were asking each other about what was happening. And Meta put out a statement saying that it was an accident, it was a glitch, and that they didn't mean to, but it was a very targeted demographic of like 14 to 26. You know what I mean? And so I think that when we look at what has happened with like the manosphere, what has happened with like these lobbies for the last decade, really, and also like people trying to manipulate elections, have utilized social media to put out disinformation and violence online that targets specific people. And so we're trying to make sense of it, but it's like, it's also manufactured and purposeful, which I think makes our brains break, because we're like, who would want to do that? Who would want to do that to our communities, to our kids? And why would millionaires have a stake in this? And it's repulsive, and I don't know what the answer is to it. I know I broke your brain. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. Because as you were talking about like the intentionality behind this supposed mistake, because again, it wasn't a mistake. It's just like the Tuskegee experiments. They were giving Black people hepatitis. They wanted to see what was going to happen. They wanted to have the data, and they wanted to have it on a live population that they studied for decades to just see how they responded. Like, I think that we are in a digital version of the Tuskegee experience, where they are specifically targeting young people with violence, with pornography, with depravity, and they're tracking to see what happens. How do they respond? You know, do they chud the builder out? Do they go around talking about Black people chimping out, ultimately to shoot them in self-defense? Like, this is what we are encouraging in our society, this type of behavior where people feel emboldened to engage in conduct that's simply not suitable for a civilized society. Like Kyle Rittenhouse and what's his name? The guy who shot Trayvon Martin.
I forgot his name.
Him too. These types of people who basically target and kill people, but because they have the complexion for the protection, they get away with it. Like, people are conditioned to conduct themselves in this way, and the society is doing the conditioning.
Or just like how Trump just made a reparations fund for everyone who was part of the January 6th insurrection. White supremacy is everywhere. It is in Spain, it is in the US, it is colonial, it is deeply embedded in our communities. And it's not until we envision something outside of that, see something outside of that, pull other parents in to see something beyond this, that we're going to be able to like untangle ourselves from what it all is.
So now that you've raised that, let's talk about the DOJ basically forum shopping to get a grand jury in Texas that was willing to issue a criminal subpoena to get medical records, private medical records from NYU Langone's hospital of their trans patients.
I think what's really important is that, and I don't have more information than this other than NYU Langone said that they would not be releasing anyone's private medical records. I don't know if that's moved forward. I think I saw online like ACLU and Lambda or one of the two saying like that they would step in, that they were stepping in on this issue. And honestly, they've been trying really hard for years to find a way to target doctors and families. And this is just another one of their attempts. And I'm really hoping the protections that have been placed recently because of Letitia Johnson and the state of New York saying that they're going to protect trans youth and gender-affirming care, I hope that those stick and that we're able to see doctors and parents be protected.
So for people who don't know what's happening, the Department of Justice recently impaneled a grand jury in a district in Texas that has been notoriously favorable to conservative causes. And what they were able to do was get a criminal subpoena, not a civil subpoena, which is how the DOJ has been trying to get records in the past, but a criminal subpoena that compels NYU Langone to turn over their records. Now, the distinction is just that. There are different penalties for failure to comply with a civil subpoena than there are for failure to comply with a criminal subpoena. And so essentially, the DOJ has ratcheted up these attempts to get records that they don't have any right to. Whatever efforts they've been making have been so transparent because they've been trying since this dude got in office to basically restrict the healthcare of transgender patients, period, full stop. And so this is yet another bald attempt to do so. And you are correct. NYU Langone has not capitulated. They have their attorneys, the ACLU, Lambda Legal, like everyone is fighting back at every corner to prevent this administration from doing that which they know they can't do. But the thing that everybody should be paying attention to is this. Their attempts to strip rights away from this small population portends their ability to do it to everyone. Everyone.
Say it one more time.
Their attempts to strip rights from transgender people portends their ability to do it to everyone. The blueprint for this conduct is in Jim Crow. The blueprint for this conduct is in Nazi Germany. It is in the way that party came into power because they got the rich people to agree that it was in their best interest to collectively form against the populace. The populace, not a group, not the Jews, not the queers, not the immigrants, the entire population. That was their target. And people don't know that that was their target. They didn't know that they had all the rich people in Germany all on the same page with what the Nazi Reich, the Third Reich, was going to do. And so what we're doing now is a replay of what the Southern plantation slaveholders were doing when Jim Crow came. That's what the rich aristocratic class in Germany was doing when the Nazis came. It is what America is doing with the tech billionaires. We are watching the erosion of rights by a very small cabal of people whose only interest is the aggrandizement of wealth and natural resources to the exclusion of all of us. Don't have to believe me. Know your history and you will know that the things that I'm speaking are true. And too many people, unfortunately, don't know their history and aren't willing to take the time to do the research to determine for themselves what's happening. And so I hope that NYU Langone and all of the other medical establishments who receive these subpoenas continue to fight back tooth and nail, because once one of those institutions crumbles, falls, capitulates, it becomes easier for them to get the next one and the next one and the next one.
That's right, Stephen. I don't have anything to say. That was perfection. You connected all the dots. You crossed all the T's. You put a period at the end. Thank you.
And now it's time for our recurring segment, Allies and Assholes, where we highlight individuals and groups who are supporting the LGBTQI community on the one hand and call out straight up assholes who are trying to move us all backwards on the other. Lisette, who are we talking about today?
Stephen, speaking of gender affirming care, this week's Ally of the Week goes to the Colorado Supreme Court. The Colorado Supreme Court ruled yesterday that Children's Hospital Colorado must resume gender-affirming care for transgender youth, delivering a major legal blow to the efforts tied to the Trump administration's campaign against trans healthcare.
Do tell.
In a 5-2 decision, the court ruled that the rights of transgender children to receive healthcare cannot be sacrificed over speculative fears of losing federal funds. Justice William Hood emphasized that allowing hospitals to abandon protected groups under political pressure would mean minority groups always lose, adding that declaration from HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. does not constitute federal law. This ruling follows a federal district court opinion in Oregon that declared the Kennedy Declaration unlawful and blocked the government from enforcing it. Stephen, I'm really relieved to hear this, and I hope that other states like my own, Arizona, follow suit because so many medical institutions stopped care over this fear of losing federal funds.
Yeah, we saw this across the country in blue states that did not have gender-affirming care bans on the books, but stopped providing care notwithstanding because of this, I think, unreasonable fear that the federal government was going to withdraw their funding. At the end of the day, your first obligation as a hospital, as a healthcare provider, as a person who took a medical oath is to do no harm. And I don't know how these hospitals that closed could reconcile themselves with stopping care that they knew was going to cause harm to their patients. And so I'm so happy that the Colorado Supreme Court did the right thing, forced the hospitals to resume care, and specifically said that the Kennedy Declaration isn't law. And so good on them.
And that is why the Colorado Supreme Court is our ally of the week.
Congratulations to the Colorado Supreme Court. Now onto our Asshole of the Week. Lisette, this week's Asshole of the Week is a group award, and it goes to every parent who has kicked out or rejected their child because of how they identify. Lisette, I can't tell you how much of an impact my visit to the Ali Forney Center, my participation at their gala made on me. I can't express to you how deeply I felt the stories that were shared by Alex Roque, both during the gala and as we took the tour, about how children end up at their doors and the condition of their lives up until they find their way to the Ali Forney Center. I can't rationalize a parent seeing somebody that they brought into the world and sending them off into the street to survive on their own, knowing now that many of those children end up being trafficked, many of those children end up having to engage in survival sex, many of those children end up in the absolute worst circumstances and situations we can even imagine, simply because they told their truth. And so for me, that parent is an asshole. And every parent that conducts themselves in this way deserves to be called an asshole, because that's exactly what you are. If you do not love your child unconditionally, the child who never asked to be here, the child who was only trying to let you know in their most vulnerable moment how they saw themselves, and your response is to kick them out on the street, you, my dear friend, are an asshole.
100%, Stephen. Your Substack today really moved me, and I think that having a child is one of the greatest gifts and learning moments for all of us who are parents, right? I think we don't truly grow up until we walk this journey with our children. And to see families continue to reject trans or LGBTQ youth is heartbreaking and honestly abusive. And the fact that parents are not held accountable for kicking out their children, rejecting their children, and causing harm to them blows my mind every day. So they deserve the title of asshole every single day.
And this is why unsupportive parents are our assholes of the week. Well, that's our show for today, folks. I've got to give it up to my incredible co-host, Lisette Trujillo, for making sure we keep doing this.
And Stephen, you knew I was going to text you to be like, hello, we haven't recorded, and I'm glad you showed up today, and we will continue to show up and do this for all of you, our listeners. We love the fact that we get to share everything that's going on and hopefully inspire you to support your trans loved one along the way. So thank you for listening.
And folks, please be sure to subscribe to our podcast, Substacks, and YouTube channels. Follow us on Instagram and my TikTok, and do everything you got to do to stay up to date with everything going on here at the Parent Advocate Podcast. Bye.
Bye.